Greetings going out to Sylvester, who's in the studio this morning filming. I've got in here a poster, well, a news clipping that you had in the topper.
Yeah.
I've proved Jesus was a black man. Book of questions, colour of Christ. A Nottingham author claims Jesus Christ was black. Pitman Browne says the traditional image of Jesus as a white, European-looking man is false. His new book, Inklings of a Black Christ, that's what we're discussing, and that's what we're talking about this morning, lists a string of arguments backing his belief that Jesus was a black man. These claims include European writers tampered with the Bible to adapt it to a white culture. The Bible has its origins in Africa and Egypt, predominantly populated by black people at that time. The first pictures of Christ portray him as black with dreadlocked hair. Michelangelo's famous paintings of a baby Jesus was altered to change his skin colour from black to white. Pitman says his aim is not to create controversy, but to put the record straight. There is no way that Jesus was white. You said, I've gathered a wealth of evidence, facts and comments with proof that Christ was black.
Yes, this is taking me right back to the pre-dynastic Egyptian times of Osiris. I will build my kingdom in earth as it is in heaven. Those words are plagiarized. They're actually said by Osiris, the first Christ. K-R-Y-S-T, Negroid features. And then, but you see, when we actually get ourselves into the Egyptian dynasty, the dynastic age, with an Ivan van Sertima, a Trinidadian American, says that the first Christ, in terms of book of the beginnings, is actually Horus. And yet still another, Gerald Massey, is claiming that the first Christ is actually Imhotep. But all these characters, the Horus, the Imhotep, and the Osiris, are all African Christs. They are pronounced African Christ. And may I say to you that the first experiment in terms of a European Christ was made by Constantine the Great. Well, a little before that, because the Ptolemaic Jews, the Ptolemaic, during just that time before Constantine, the Alexander the Great came into focus. But there were white representations of what our deity, the actual worshipping of God, should be. But Constantine the Great made at the Council of Nicaea, AD 325, the first, you'd say, representation. And then that was taken up by the Italians much, much later by Pope Julius II, ordering Michelangelo to go down into Florence and engage with his uncle. So his uncle put his 33-year-old son in the studio, and Michelangelo painted him as the Jesus Christ. His hair was blonde, his eyes are blue, and this man, in fact, what is so annoying about this experiment is that it was not even Palestine. The dress was Florentine. The outline of the man is Florentine, nothing to do with Palestine at all, because Jesus did not wear a flowing white robe, for instance, because Palestinians wore frock-like. Palestine is a hilly, rough country. And we're talking about Nubia here, and Nubia encapsulates Egypt, Sudan.
I've got a question for you. God created man in his own image. So do you think a lot of us, wherever we come from, artists of those times, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, do you think, especially as an artist, a lot of people back then artists back then captured Christ as how they envisioned him to be, his image, just like an African of that time had their image of how Christ was. Is there actually, we've got a couple of descriptions of Christ's possible complexion in the Bible.
Yes.
But from a white person's point of view, white European, they see Christ in their own image as being this long, flowy, golden coloured hair with blue eyes. Africans see him as short hair, like wool.
Yes.
And maybe a dark skin colour because of that time. You know, they were Mediterranean looking. Couldn't possibly be a white colour. I think we accept that now.
No.
Some churches accept that. You know,
yes.
some churches do accept that. You know, it's impossible for, Celtic. A lot of the Celtic, like people like Hitler and of those times in the European times envisioned him to be white because that's what they wanted and that's how they accepted Christ to be. Yeah. So, do you think? I'm just asking you this question. Do you think we want to put Christ into a box? We want to see what colour Christ is for our own satisfaction, or do you think Christ really does have a colour? Do you really believe it's in our own? God created him in His own image, an image of man. So it's image of who.
Well, we'll have to stand on the Bible in order to engage with this particular question, because if we go into Revelation 1 verse 14 and 15, his head and his hairs are as white as wool, as white as snow. So the Random House Dictionary 1986 says that hair that is white as wool is actually lamb's wool, not sheep's wool. And lamb's wool is short, thick and crisp. So let's go to feet of brass. And what the King James translators saw was the word charcoalibanon, because brass is not a real, just ask any metallurgy student, brass is not a real substance at all, because it's a mixture of alloy and copper and tin. At least 80% of copper. So what the King James translators by saying charcoalibanon, should be, it's a mistranslation, they should be talking about copper, but what they actually came up with is burnt brass. So it's saying soot, a process of oxidization, sooty or soot, so rust. So we're talking about an African feat. So there's a terrible dichotomy arising from this. How can we have African feet, soot, brass?
Brass.
Yeah, brass.
Brass is like brown in colour, like a bit like my colour.
Like dark brown.
Dark brown.
Burnt brass.
Yeah.
Dark brown. African features. And yet still we're having upper body of white European. That does not make sense. But into Daniel 10 verse 6, it mentions hands and feet of brass. And when you look at verse 13, it's actually talking about the archangel. Saint Michael is also negroid. And when you go back into Revelation 1, 14 and 15, it says one like the Son of Man. So who is like the Son of Man? Well, Jesus Christ was of the excellent order of Melchizedek. If you go into Hebrews 7 verse 21, so Melchizedek had the same negroid features as the Son of Man. So what I'm trying to put to you is a composite feature of negroid characters coming from out of the Bible. But unfortunately, because we have been indoctrinated with a plethora of lies, of misinformation, we have got to make do with blonde pictures from beginning to end. And I think that is a grave injustice, so as to give some honor and credence to the fact that this October is Black History Month, African History Month, and for goodness sake, how long are we going to tolerate a plethora of misinformation and lies? All of the Old Testament characters are African characters. The 12 tribes of Judah, they are African characters. The 10 lost tribes, all right, the subject of amalgamation. But the clearest, according to Dr. Barshango, of all of the tribes is the tribe of Yehuda or Judah. There is no J. And the tribe of Judah is black, navel, black, blue. They are the darkest of all of the tribes. And how do we know this? Is Josephus did mention in Jewish wars that when he went out on the battle lines, he saw the smoke-filled faces and their heads looking like, I don't know, sooty head, the Jewish battle lines.
Yeah.
And that is excellent linguistic language description of what the Jews, the war between the Jews and the Romans, AD 70. The Romans are Europeans, but the Jews are actually, as described by Josephus, African men. So what happened to the Jews after that great battle, AD 70? Every one of them returned to Mama. When you are in trouble, you go back home. Those same African Jews from Jerusalem during 2,000 years ago are now living in Ghana. Ella Hewley's book, The Truth About the Biblical Black Hebrew Israelites, she says the same thing, that the Jews who occupied Jerusalem 2,000 years ago are now descended in Ghana. Whenever the situation presents, the occasion presents itself, the first place I'd like to go is Egypt. Because it just is a marvel. For instance, it's like watching a football match. It's a completely different thing. If you went to see the pyramid of Cheops and you see the body of a man and underneath the body of a lion, which is saying that the reptilian, the lowest of the lowest animal, is part and parcel of that must be contained, must be crucified, must be self-controlled in order to allow the intellect and the mind and the spirit to rise to the sonam bonum. Sonam bonum is the extreme, the good of which humanity is capable, to bring us into appropriate identification with the divine, to capture an essence of the Creator. So the pyramid of Cheops is just telling us that. Broad nose, thick lips, and we feel a sense of pride.
Yeah.
That is an African Christ. Horus, that is another of the Christ that I did not mention, as enshrined in the Hairy Maquette, or otherwise the Pyramid of Cheops, was seen as a Christ. It's just an embodiment of one of the pharaohs. And let me say, in terms of rites of passage and rites of initiation, what the Bible has lost is some of our own rites of passage that says every one of the pharaohs, the Negroid pharaohs who rose to power to sit on the throne, have had to become a Christ. First of all, to become a Christ is to go through all of the rites of passage from childhood. But when you blossom into becoming a Christ, then that means you can hear from the Creator. Now, that's nothing to do with religion. That is to do with communication.
Amen. Amen. This was something that Pauline Dunku wrote as part of, who was a contributor to Pitman's book. It says this this misrepresentation of black history at the most formative stages of our lives can often have deep-seated repercussions when one enters adulthood. It is therefore critically important that people like Pitman and ourselves critically question history by questioning whose story is it actually telling. The process makes us aware that the process of creating history is bound up in ideological mistruths which may not reflect which occurring at the which is occurring at that time. It is only when history created a variety of sources is analysed that can some sense of history be constructed. So that was by Pauline Dunker. Thank you for coming in. I really enjoyed that. I hope you got something from that this morning, Nottingham. How can they contact you, Pitman? They want a copy.
Right.
Your contact details. Do you have a website or email address?
Oh yes. My website is kitaboo.pet.com. Kitaboo hyphen, not underscore. Kitaboo hyphen pet gmail.com.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Pitman. That was great. Thank you.